So what are you saying, people? We're back again for another episode of The Social Worker and the Mentor. Guys, thank you so much for liking and subscribing, for following the content that me and Rob are doing. Rob is abroad enjoying himself in Morocco. So, bruv, make sure you bring back the sun. People, as I said in the last episode, and I'm going to keep on saying it, our Patreon is now live. So there's a lot of content that's up there of myself and Rob, me going into the Department for Education. You're going to be seeing a lot of me doing a lot of work with the Chief Social Worker, Isabel Trowler. I'm doing a lot of work with her. You're going to see a lot more content. You're going to see a different interface of myself and Rob. Rob's already started his workshop. He's been going around to schools. So we want to kind of get you guys to see differently how me and him are working. So not just Nana the social worker, but also what I do outside of this as well, yeah? So, yeah, you know where to find myself and Rob. You like, subscribe, and you share. So, people, I have a very, very, very amazing guest here today. Yeah, and I actually really excited about having this guest over on the podcast. And I'm not going to tease the reason why, but you'll know the reason why. So, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, guys. My name is Shaybo, also known as Laura. Just to provide a bit of context and background, I'm a recording artist. I've worked with a lot of musicians within the music and entertainment space, but I was also formerly a social worker and a domestic violence and abuse advocate. And I also worked as a program facilitator for the Grenfell Tower survivors.
Oh, wow. Absolutely. Yeah, Jermaine, man, we got to clap for that, man. No, honestly, Laura, thank you so much for coming. Do you know what? It's crazy because, do you know what? I always knew you were a social worker, and I think it's nice and fitting to be able to hear the crossover from social work to music. But let's just start about social work before we talk about your music. So what made you go into social work?
So basically, I've always had a nurturing and caring spirit. And I've come from a family who's always been in the health and social care sector anyway. And I found that when I was in school, I was doing my GCSEs and I wasn't really good at anything except for health and social care. So I actually had a distinction star when I was in school. And then I went to college and I studied health and social care as well. Again, got a distinction star there. So I said to myself, I have three choices. Do I want to be a nurse? Do I want to be a social worker? Or do I want to aspire to be a doctor? And I said to myself, I'm somebody who's a caring person, but when it comes to actually physically taking care of people, it's a bit difficult for me. So I said to myself, why not be a social worker? And I actually applied to go to social work because, there's a test you have to do type of thing. Yeah. I applied to go to South Bank. I applied to go to Canterbury.
Okay.
I applied to go to the one in Leicester as well.
Okay, yeah.
So when I went to my interview in South Bank, I didn't get in.
You didn't get to LSBU?
No, I didn't. I didn't get in. And then I went to the Coventry one. I didn't get in.
Okay.
But then randomly, Canterbury was just we want to take you in type of thing. So then I got into Canterbury and then the journey just began from there.
Right. So when you did your degree, so talk about your placements. What were your two placements that you had?
So
your 70 day and your 100 day.
So I was in fostering and disabilities. So I had to go to, because I was in Canterbury at the time, I think I had to go to Faversham. Okay. And I was working with social workers within the fostering and disability sector. Okay. So it was a specialised field because usually they would put you into adult social care or they would put you into children and families. But the fostering and disabilities one was just quite calm. It wasn't too much stress and stuff like that. And I was basically observing as another social worker was kind of doing her caseloads and stuff like that, and she would give me caseloads for myself. So she'll give me about 2 caseloads that I kind of had to deal with myself.
Did you co-work with that as a student?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about your 100 day, your final day placement?
My 100 day placement, I was working with a school. Okay. So I had another social worker. So I was working with children and families. Okay. And I was working with a school within Canterbury. And I had to go into the schools, and I went to St. Nicholas, which is a school of children with disabilities as well. Okay. So I spent most of the time in the schools working in in the school space, kind of observing the children and stuff like that, and working with the social workers that kind of are collaborating with the school. So I'll do home visits and stuff like that.
Okay.
So yeah.
So when you finished and you got your degree and you qualified, you didn't go and do your ASYE. So what was your decision around not wanting to do your ASYE?
Basically, I said to myself, because sometimes after you do placement, I was worn out, and I said to myself, I want to go to London for a bit.
Okay.
So when I went to London, I actually applied for a job, and this was when the Grenfell Tower situation happened.
Right.
And I basically sent over my CV and I said, hey, I'm training to be a social worker. I haven't yet got my degree for the third year and stuff like that. But, it's predicted that I'm going to have this grade or whatever it is. And then basically they took me in, and what I was in charge of doing, I was in charge of facilitating the programs, because they didn't have a structure. It was a charity, but they were a new charity and they didn't really create an infrastructure. So I used my skills from, writing caseloads and stuff like that to kind of create a structure for them. But it was basically the same thing as placement. It was being given a caseload, going to these children's houses, having a conversation with their parents and stuff like that, and really observing them and seeing how the trauma has affected them and their lives and stuff like that. So I was in charge of facilitating programs, but I always wanted to make those programs as fun as possible. So I would take them to the gym, I would take them to fun places within the community, and then I would observe them, and then I would kind of do a report to help the parents understand what they kind of need to do to kind of make sure their children are okay.
Yeah. So your work with, Grenfell Tower, I mean, we all saw what happened, absolute travesty. So many people lost their lives. What was the work you were doing at Grenfell? Because I remember when, at the time I was in my first local authority, and one of the things I think it was the borough's K&C, they were just kind of asking and just saying, other local authority social workers to kind of support. So in terms of, I know it was an unqualified role, but what kind of work were you doing? I think I did see a bit of what you were doing, actually. What kind of work were you doing with Grenfell? So
basically, we was working with other people within the community. So we was working with doctors, we was working with youth workers as well. We was working with the mosque, because the mosque played a huge role in kind of supporting the community at that time. And what I was basically doing is, there's a gym around Grenfell, and we was basically working on cultivating relationships with all the people that are within the space that have a professional background in the community. And we was basically taking on referrals from, the GPs and stuff like that, to say this child could use some support and stuff like that, because we was given a funding. The charity was given a funding to kind of support the youth and the young people. So what I basically did is, I wanted to create a program, because there's not a lot of youth clubs within the area. There's the mosque, which is a community within itself, but I didn't think there was a lot of fun places that the youth could go. So what I did was, I facilitated programs where I wanted them to go to the gym. So we would do sessions like in the gym, like running sessions and stuff like that. We would go to tennis, because there was a tennis court around that area as well. So what I mainly wanted to do was include fun activities within that program. And then I would do reports and caseloads to kind of explain the progress. So some of the children were kind of traumatized, so they didn't like to kind of be indoors. So they wanted to be outside due to the trauma of like isolated spaces and stuff like that. So I was basically observing how they were and how they interacted and stuff like that. And then I would have one-to-one conversations with them to basically explain, how do you feel about the situation? What happened in the situation? Because some of them have actually lost their families. So I was kind of trying to be the fun and the vibesy person, but at the same time I was still observing and I was still making my notes and stuff like that behind that. But I would say a lot of the parents were more concerned about where they were going to live and the funding for those things. So when we was kind of trying to say, hey, you can bring your children here to kind of work with us and have fun with us, they was just like, but we still don't have anywhere to live.
Yeah.
So we need to now speak to the council. Then we need to speak to
what the next step is.
the GP for what the next step is, because they had temporary housing, and a lot of them didn't have temporary housing because there wasn't a lot of like temporary accommodation available. So they would have to go to a hotel outside of the borough. So it was very difficult for them to kind of get their children into schools
and commuting in every single day.
Yeah, basically. So there was quite a lot going on, and it was very chaotic.
Yeah.
But I think as a charity, we tried our best to kind of like provide a space for the young people to kind of be outside of school.
So talk to me, Laura, about your pivot now from social work to music. That's what I'm going to call it, from social work to music.
Yeah.
So your decision to go into music, talk to me about that.
So I started making music when I was 14 years old. After that, I went to school and I went through the whole educational process of becoming a social worker.
Yeah.
But at the same time, even though professionally I was a community and outreach worker, at the back of my mind, I still wanted to do music. So I remember using my paycheck when I would get on the train from Westminster, because I used to live in Deptford at the time. So it was a long train journey. And I remember just writing raps and then using the pay that I got from the job to kind of pay for my music videos.
Yeah.
And then just like that, I ended up getting loads of views, and then I just happened to be a rapper. But this is the interesting thing. And this is what the music space doesn't talk about. Once you are no longer within the working society and you start doing music, you've lost that sense of structure. So for a very long time in my career, I forgot I was a social worker because I was so now into this artist that I've become.
Did it conflict with your values?
100%. And I think that's what slowed me down in my journey in the music space, because the music world is so different from the community world. And it's like a completely different world that it's very difficult to explain until you're actually in it. But there's no structure there. There's no moral compass there. There's no right and wrong there. It's basically a weird space to be in, because there's drugs, there's alcohol, there's no infrastructure. It's just you're tapped into so many different worlds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I found that I lost myself completely as a social worker. But then for some reason, when I was called to come into the schools, no matter what I was doing, I would always make my way to the schools.
So I'm gonna push you a bit more. So you mentioned about the music, the music you were making, and the fact you felt you were losing yourself and forgetting that you were a qualified social worker. So what was the kind of event that made you think, you know what, I'm a social worker, so the music and my lyrics, they're not correlating with the degree that I've done. So was there a particular event, something that was like light bulb moment, not light bulb, but like, no, I'm a social worker, so I need to literally come back and remember. What was it for you?
I found myself dimming my light and my intelligence in order to be socially accepted within the music and entertainment space.
All right, go in a bit more.
So
that's quite deep what you just said, actually.
Yeah, I just found that I was dumbing myself down to fit in. And I said to myself, not to say the artists within the music and entertainment space are uneducated, but like I've been trained for years to see the whole music model and see the label structure and see the system and see the flaws in the system. And I've been trained for years to understand people's behaviors and understand people, so I can kind of see through the mask, right? And I just found myself like thinking to myself, my level of intelligence in this space, it's a waste of intelligence. I don't know how to explain that to you, but I was just like, the people that are making music pretending like we are good people, I see through the mask, right? And I found myself always finding myself back within the community. So I never fit in, like, because in the music space, you have parties, you have, you have clubs, you have concerts. But because of my social work, my moral and ethical principles, I just didn't belong there. Like certain things they would be doing, I wouldn't be doing, because it still goes against my core values as a social worker type of thing. So I said to myself, first of all, why is my music the way it is if I'm a social worker? So it had to be a long and hard conversation I had to have with myself. But then I realized when we're going into the workspace, everybody's got a mask on, right? You're going into there as a social worker, but you have your personal life behind that.
You do, yeah.
So I found that, who am I when I'm not in the social work space? And clearly, because the music I'm making is clearly coming from somewhere subconsciously, right? So then I dug deep within myself, and I self-reflected as a social worker, and I realized I'm a people pleaser and I struggle with boundaries. So the music you're hearing is my subconscious mind saying what I really think. So when people would meet me, it's like I'm so opposite from my music. So then I found that very interesting. But I said to myself, there has to be a way that I can change my music to now fit the social worker, because I said to myself, I can't be two people, I have to choose one, type of thing. And in saying that, I really wanted to kind of create more positive music. But then in order for me to create more positive music, I'm influenced by the people I'm surrounded by. I'm influenced by the environments I'm in. So I had to kind of be back within the community space to now be able to kind of creatively make the right music, because I found myself also being surrounded by the wrong people. So I went from somebody who doesn't smoke, who doesn't curse, who's not really seeking the validation and the approval of people by wearing designers, to being around the wrong people, to now smoking, to now cursing, to now wearing designers when it's something in the normal day I wouldn't wear. Yeah. And I said to myself, it's very, very interesting how the people you surround yourself with can corrupt character. And I really had to take accountability there, because I said to myself, how am I a social worker and I'm around people that are like not really my tribe? But I found that it's because of my social work background, I don't really see anybody as good or bad. I see human beings as having a capacity to be good and bad. Some people are good 70%, but they have 30% bad ways about them. Some people are bad, 80%, but they have 20% of good within them. So because I had the social work knowledge, I understood people and I understood things based on theory. I didn't look at bad people like they were bad people. And I didn't look at good people like they were good people either. So it was a very interesting journey for me.
Part of social work, and you said a lot of things which are very, very powerful. Part of social work, Laura, this is about reflection. And what you're talking about is being able to separate Laura and Shaybo, and it reminds me of at university we you don't know if you remember, but it's called Johari's Window. So Johari's Window is a model that looks at your sense of self. I remember my lecturer, big up to her, my lecturer, Dr. Tanya Moore. She in our I think it was my first year, but preparation for practice. And Johari's window looks at your sense of self. So what is known to you and what is known to others. So what do you know about yourself, and what is it, and how do others perceive you? So that crossover point for you, how do you separate I'm asking you a reflective question. How do you separate the rapper and the social worker now?
It's about...
I know it's a deep reflective question, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's a question I've been thinking about for a very long time, because the way people perceive me, because not everybody knows I'm a social worker. A lot of people, especially because of the views I have on YouTube, I have 10 million views of me smoking weed and 10 million views of me saying, the most unsocial work things. Yeah. So I realized people will treat you how you represent yourself. That's right? So I said to myself, there needs to be a way that I can now change people's perception of me. Of course, I've provided context in interviews, but my music actually has to align that. And I actually have to be about it. Because even though I was doing the community and outreach work and I went to uni to train to be a social worker, I'm still somebody who's come from the hood. I'm still somebody who's had friends that are not necessarily good people, if that makes sense. I'm still somebody who has gone through trials and tribulations in my life, or as much as I have the knowledge to kind of reflect on them and understand why I am the way I am. I think I'm still somebody who's had to deal with a lot of things and understand why I've been through the things I've been through, right? And I also found that as a Black woman, coming from uni with a social work knowledge, going back into, you know, the hood, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm articulating myself and I'm trying to have an intellectual conversation, it's like there's this projection. And I've always found that I dim my light and I dim my intelligence because I never wanted people to kind of look at me like, because there's just this energy that people give off to you when you show you have a high level of intelligence. And I've always wanted to kind of be socially accepted because I always wanted to maintain the same friendship groups, you know, the people you've grown up with. And it's like, for a long time, I found myself, you know, acting like I was just like an airhead. Like I would become the younger version of me. Subconsciously, I always play the little girl, like the airhead, like somebody who doesn't know what's going on. And I found that so interesting about myself because I said to myself, I'm a highly intelligent person. Like I literally see everything.
And knowledgeable.
Yeah, I see everything that goes on around me, but I just don't, like, a part of me doesn't want people to know that I'm an intelligent person.
And would you say, another deep thing I want to say, would you say you hid that from people that you were a social worker?
Yes.
Forget the job role of a social worker, but the fact that you went to university, you got a degree, you're doing a social work, you're a qualified social worker. Would you say you hid that from that I'm a social worker and this is the work that I do and all those sorts of things?
100%. Because in the music and entertainment space, you're not dealing with people who have the education. You're dealing with a lot of people that are not as educated as, because I will say, you know, intelligence is subjective, right? Mm-hmm. But I just felt like I'm coming into a space where I'm dealing with a lot of people that have just come from the street that I completely understand, but from a social work perspective, right?
Yeah.
But then if I'm speaking this way and I'm having an articulate conversation with them and I'm trying to have an intellectual conversation, to them it comes across as I'm patronizing.
Okay.
So I said to myself, to avoid conflict and to avoid people's projections coming onto me, I might as well just like play like the unintelligent person.
So would you say, Laura, because one of the things you speak about the music space and your lyrics, and a lot of the young people that we work with, we know listen to a lot of music, do you know what I mean? You know, the SPTVs, everything. A lot of young people I've worked with, they listen to it. In the music space, I want to ask, and you know, because I'm not in that space, but you're in that space. Is there a level of safeguarding within the music space for artists? Because like I said, I don't know, but I know obviously in our sector there's a level of safeguard, but is there a level of safeguarding in the music space? And if there isn't, what do you think it would look like from your perspective as someone who is a social worker and has been in the space? I
think if a young person wants to do music, they should definitely have their parents or family managing them. Yeah. Because I've had situations where I've put people in control of what I'm doing and they've stolen from me. There's no structure whatsoever. Like people get away with anything there. Like I said, there's drugs. There's with the guys, they're disrespecting women because they feel like they've now have this superstar status. Like you're dealing with people with incredibly humongous yet fragile egos. And I found that although I'm able to kind of distinguish the difference between Laura as a person and Shaybo as an artist, it keeps me humble and it keeps me grounded because I'm not somebody who's seeking the validation of stardom, right? But a lot of these guys, because it's a male-dominated industry, they don't know who they are. They know who they're being told to be. And they know what the people are telling them they are. Right. So it's like you're creating this version of yourself. You're using a name that's not actually your name. And it's like you're living that person, even though you're not that person. Yeah. And it's like when people would meet me, I found that they would be like confused, right? Because I'm not the person
that they're seeing on YouTube. Yeah.
But this is the thing. I have a strong understanding of myself, so I don't play that person because I understand that person is my subconscious mind. It's not me. But then they don't know themselves in the sense of they haven't been able to create this distinction between
Laura and Shaybo. Yeah.
So it's just a tricky one because everybody's in a different stage of understanding themselves as a musician. Yeah. So it's just about having a kind of understanding, because when I started, I was acting like I wasn't. I was battling Shaybo and Laura.
Right.
So I was speaking, like I was just saying like, yo, what you saying? Like it's like I created Shaybo, but then I was playing Shaybo, and subconsciously I closed Laura away.
Right, okay.
And that's what happens with a lot of artists in the beginning, because it takes them a while to kind of differentiate the difference between the two.
So let me go in, I'm going to go in even a bit more further than what you're saying, because I think it's very, very important what you're talking about for professionals, but also I think for the music industry as well. With what you're saying about separating the two, or not knowing who you are, what about the essence of mental health within the music space? Because surely, I'm just asking, there should be some form of a practitioner or a safeguarding lead to be able to speak to the artists about things like this. Because obviously, yes, all the glitz and glamour, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes for many artists. But what about having those services come into the space, like what you were saying earlier about if you're a young artist and you're coming in, your parents should be there. But should there be some form of safeguarding manager for artists that can speak to you and go and say, right, you know what, right, I see this how you're performing, but is everything okay with your mental health? How are you coping? Because maybe it might be there, but I don't know, Laura, is that there? And if it isn't there, why is it? If it isn't there, why not?
I would say the labels don't care. I would say the labels see it as, you see, once you are an artist, you become a product, right? A product no different from the bottle of water, a product no different from a Coca-Cola bottle. And what they intend to do as a label is to market this product to make as much money as they possibly can from the product. So whether the product is functioning well or is not functioning well mentally, it doesn't matter. We've created this product, we've dressed this product how we want to dress this product, and we need this product to function, basically. Now, I've always said there should be a mental health and well-being team funded by the labels to support these artists, because these artists are dealing with depression, because what you're doing as an artist is not normal. The bigger you become as an artist, the more lonely you feel, because nobody actually sees the person, they see the product, right? On top of that, you're dealing with so many different human beings that do not know you at once, and you always have to be an approachable person. So a person might be dealing with social anxiety, a person might be dealing with depression, a person might just want to go out one day with a tracksuit and you know, with their bonnet on just to run to the shop. You still have to be that product.
Right.
The labels don't care whether you have mental health issues. A lot of artists within the music space have mental health issues. At some point, I had mental health issues. And that was because I was dealing with severe depression to the point where I didn't even want to come out of my house, because I'm somebody who's always dealt with social anxiety. So I'm dealing with so many people running up to me. I don't know what it is, because as somebody who's now seen as a product and as somebody who's been given a lot of money, it's like the label don't pay for your protection. The label don't pay for, you know, the things that you kind of need to protect yourself. It's kind of your responsibility, right? So there's so much safeguarding, there's so much mental health, there's so much depression, and the labels always welcome it because they're thinking that's how you get the best creative in a way. Because it's like the more your mind is kind of corrupt, the more, you know, you make the best music. And for me, from my experience, because I felt like I lost sight of family.
Right.
I lost sight of family. I lost sight of reality. Like I didn't leave my house for about 6 months at a time. And the only time I would leave my house is if I had a studio session, or if I had to go to a show, or if I had to travel. It's like I lost sight of the real world. And the most of artists, we lose sight of the real world because there's no infrastructure, there's no structure, there's no, okay, we're going into work today, we're clocking out, we're going home to be with our family. With the music space, it's like you're an artist 24/7. There's no break unless you actually create that break.
But in that, Laura, is very much a concern, really. You know, in social work, whenever we're working with families, we say behind every percentage, there's a child, there's a family you're working with. And I would apply that same ethos and thinking in terms of, although I'm not in the music space, to musicians, in terms of what you're saying, that behind a musician, there is a person. And actually, you know, speaking as a social worker, and where, you know, we talk a lot about mental health and trauma, there should be, and I think what you're saying is a brilliant point. It should happen, that there should be a safeguarding well-being team for artists to be able to speak on these kind of things? Because like I said, for all the videos and all the views that you get, you know, we as the consumer, as the viewers and you know, the fans, we don't know what's going on. Do you know what I'm saying? And what you were saying about social anxiety, not coming out for 6 months, that's a lot for any, take you being an artist out of it, that's a lot for any person to deal with. We know mental health is a big problem. We know there's a shortage in terms of services and we're trying, but that is massive, what you just said. And I do think what you're saying is right. The artist, the industry itself, there needs to be that level of oversight and that safeguarding. What would it look like for you? If you had a model, what would that model of safeguarding look like for you in music?
So before every artist gets signed or before they get big, they go on their trip. And the trip, I call it the trip, and everybody within the music space calls it the trip. And the trip is basically, you are no longer in touch with society. So you're no longer doing the routine. You're no longer waking up at a certain time, going to work, coming home. There's no structure there, because as a creative, it's like, go to the studio, make your music. If you blow, you've got shows 24/7. You've got, you know, commitments 24/7. And that trip is when you lose yourself and you battle the musician you've created and you as a person. And I really think it's important to have a mental health professional assigned to each and every one of these artists the moment they're signed, to kind of prepare them for their trip, because there is no structure and there is nobody telling them how it's going to go. And I always suggest that the mental health professional make sure that the family is close, because in life you need pillars. So you need family, you need friends, you need your career path, then probably a partner and all of that stuff. So if you're dealing with a young artist who doesn't have all of these things, definitely have the family close. Because there's times that I've whistleblown and I've said, hey, this person's taking advantage of me, and nobody cared.
Right.
They would tell the person that, it's like you're reporting a person to their abuser. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
So definitely have family around you, have people you trust around you, but definitely the mental health team will kind of be there to kind of, if they see that the artist is crashing or it's a bit too much, because like I said, you're a product, so people just want to use you as much as they possibly can while you have the momentum. Definitely have a mental health professional with the power to kind of say to the labels, no, this person needs time to kind of get themselves together, and have the labels kind of give them the power to be able to say no, or have the families be able to tell the mental health team, like, no, it's not going to work right now. This person needs time to kind of take care of themselves. And I think the mental health team should also be able to kind of create a structure of boundaries if they see there's a lack of structure when dealing with the artists, because a lot of young artists, they're having their friends around them. And some of them friends are, you know, coming from, you know, gangs and stuff like that. So a lot of these artists lose their careers because their friends are carrying knives or their friends are carrying weapons to their shows and stuff like that. So it's just, there needs to be a huge team that safeguards. But the only problem there is the music space, and a lot of these artists have different worlds, right? So to be able to get enough mental health professionals to kind of facilitate each artist, because on top of that you have to be conscious of the personality trait of each artist.
Right.
So if you have a mental health professional for Taylor Swift, it's not going to be the same mental health professional you have for, you know, somebody that's coming from the block.
I understand, yeah.
Because the things that Taylor Swift has dealt with in her life compared to somebody that's coming from the block.
Experiences are
everybody's experiences are different, and they're coming into the music space with different traumas that they still haven't dealt with in the first place. So it's a lot to think about. But you know, Laura, with what you were saying about and like I said, I'm asking because I want to learn what you mentioned about what artists are dealing with and the trauma they may bring into the music space. Is there no, and like I said, people might go and say, Nanny, you're asking a stupid question, but I know why I'm asking it. Is there no kind of like initial assessment that happens to, because what you're saying is so important, and I think it needs to be brought into light. But is there no kind of initial assessment where, when you, Laura, for example, were starting out, that you got to speak to someone and someone went and said, okay, right, so you're Laura, I want to know about you, your upbringing, I want to know about your drive. Okay, why did you pick the name Shaybo? Why is it did none of that kind of screen? I know it sounds stupid, but it's a good question.
Yeah, but none of that kind of I'm seeing it as if a referral comes into children's services, you screen it. Is that no level of screening for any of the artists?
No one cares, because the labels see it as, let's say you're a Coca-Cola bottle.
Yeah.
They can see the people are so excited for the Coca-Cola bottle. Like, this Coca-Cola bottle has already had like 60 million sales. And it shows that in the stats, yeah? And when I'm referring to the sales, I'm referring to Spotify or I'm referring to Apple Music. They can see like, wow, this person is got the momentum, and wow, everybody wants this person. They don't care what you're going through. They don't care where you're coming from. They just care about numbers and money, how that transfers into money, how that transfers into long-term profit. And it's like, we don't care what you're going through. Here's a big bag of money, huge sum of money that I know you've never seen before. They don't tell you, they don't give you, they don't give you a financial advisor. They don't give you an accountant. They don't tell you how to spend your money. They don't, because you have to understand, people that are coming from the hood, 300,000 is like life-changing money. But a lot of the times when you get that amount of money, you blow that money because there's nobody actually teaching you what to use that money for.
Right.
So they don't teach you all of these things. They're just looking at it like, this is a product. This is a product that's making a lot of noise right now. How can I benefit from this product? Just like you would do with anything in the business world. If somebody's selling water, okay, I have water. Everybody wants water. How am I going to package this water to be, desirable to the masses?
Yeah.
And how much am I going to sell it for? And how soon can I get it out there?
Yeah.
Somebody who is a caring person will do their due diligence.
That's right.
About where the water's coming from.
Yeah.
Or what properties are within the water.
What's the nutrients?
Yeah, what's the nutrients? What's the pH? Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, because they've dealt with so many different brands of bottle of water, it's like, oh, this is the new thing. So we're just going to package it and chuck it out there.
What's next for you, Laura, now? Because I kind of feel as though, speaking to you, you are actually in such a, you're very articulate, you're in such a reflective space, and I can just, your energy is that you are moving on and you are transitioning, you're very reflective. So what's next for you?
To be honest, I still want to do music, but I want to do music in a much more positive way. But I want to be able to kind of create within the music space a program that serves in the best interest of the youth within the community. Because I realise there's a lot of youth clubs closing down all over London. And what I want to do is, because I've been into the schools, I've gone into the schools to have conversations.
I see you go to schools, yeah, you do. Yeah. I've seen you.
And I find that outside of the family structure and them going into schools, I still see that there needs to be a space where young people can kind of go to kind of offload and have fun. I work with a group of young people that focus on music and using music as their therapy. But what I want to do is be able to kind of cultivate as much relationships within the community to create a fun space for the youth, to where like we can go to Fort Park and have the different school teachers pick who they want to come to Fort Park as a school, and just be able to kind of do fun things like that, or go to the cinema once in a while.
Would you come back to social work? You know I was going to ask that, innit? If you say it's not a bad thing, you know what I mean? Everyone pivots all the time, do you know what I mean?
Do you know what? I would definitely, I know my place and my core and where I want to be is within the community, but I don't want to neglect music as well. And if I was going to come back to social work, it would have to be in like a special way where I'm not necessarily a social worker by definition, but I'm still doing... You want
to use your social work differently?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Use my social work to kind of like, similar to what I did for Grenfell, like facilitate a program where I can do for the young people, because I specialize with like young people. I've always taken to young people.
Yeah. I'm gonna after this episode, I'm gonna tell you something that I think you should do, but I'll tell you off camera, because I think it's just in what we were saying about the safeguarding in music. Yeah, but I think, Laura, to be honest with you, I think I've learned a lot today from you in terms of your journey. I do think what you were talking about in terms of safeguarding in music, I do agree with you. I think mental health services and support services, there needs to be, I mean, in social we call it TAC, team around the child, team around the family. I think within the music space, those services need to actually come in, because I think musicians as well need to have that level of safeguarding for themselves. I think with what you were saying about, trauma and what they bring in, I do think is very, very important. And I hope that, you know, labels, if they may or may not watch this, do take that into account. As somebody, both of us are social workers, so we've worked with families, young people and children, and we know how important we know mental health on the rise, the level of suicide, we know what's going on. So I do hope that for the music industry, that level of oversight does come, because it's very, 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 very important. So no, but Laura, honestly, I just want to thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
Honestly, today was so educational for me, and so reflective. I was going to say, where can people find you? But people, where can they find you?
YouTube, find me on Instagram at Shaybo Music. Yeah. So
guys, listen, you know where to find Laura. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and she's doing fantastic work, and I'm actually really looking forward to your new phase and new music, and definitely. I'll always tell you, Laura, when you're ready, do come back to the profession when you are ready. Yeah.
Yeah,
you know
I will do.
But guys, you know where to find myself and Rob. You like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.